All right, I want to take a small amount of time. I'm hoping it's a small amount of time. Not to do a sale. It looks like I'm got a whole bunch of games out for a sale that's coming up. You wish. These are mostly games that I don't think I'm going to part with unless I can't game anymore, if I don't have any brain cells left. But I wanted to kind of touch on how the last, I would say, maybe 8 to 10 years in my experience of how I've arrived at this point in what I'm gaming, why I'm gaming, what kind of things I'm looking for. As typical of people my age who've been involved in this hobby for a while, and I started out with Tactics 2 way back in the 70s, and I remember playing that with a good friend of mine and having arguments even back then about zones of control, and that was a little weird. Tactics 2, remember, was, if you've seen that game, it's not hexes, it's squares. So we had some arguments about that, and I actually remember writing to Avalon Hill to ask for a rules on a rules question way before the internet, when you could just email or go online to find out some answers. The typical progression through the Avalon Hill series of games, Battle of Bulge, Gettysburg, the old Gettysburg, Blitzkrieg, etc. on through. I had tons of Avalon Hill and Victory games, not too much SPI stuff. And then as I got into Bass College, I didn't have as much time to play, even though I kept adding to my collection through the 80s. By the time the 90s rolled around, my career, my job was really just too intense to have a lot of time for it. So I had a lot of games. I had this big collection, and then when eBay came about and I started a family, I found out I could get some okay, at least I thought it was an okay amount of money for selling off a bunch of those games. I'm not sure if I regret it or not. At the time, it made sense for me. So I was pretty much totally out of the hobby for a number of years, and then didn't get back into it about 10 years ago. And it's amazing how much things had changed in that time period, of about 15 years, and the advances they've made with rules and concepts, and just getting away from the typical hex encounter stuff that we grew up with. And some of that was starting to evolve in the 80s and on into the 90s, obviously, but it really took off, I think, in the last 15, 20 years. So I wasn't set out to collect games, but I started adding games, and I would get into a spurt where I'd get a bunch of games, and then I would try them out, or I'd try out a system, and it didn't really seem like the one for me. I was almost like trying to catch up. And then I would sell them off, and then I'd try some other ones, and I might sell those. And I went through a cycle of some of the game systems I know I've purchased several of them 2 times. Like, I would buy, then sell, and then buy it back again. And I hate to admit, and some of you probably can admit to this too, but I think there's a couple that I did 3 times before finally settling on, like, I need to keep this. But I've gotten to the point where I really want to play more and focus on a few things that really spark enjoyment. And my criteria is this: I like games that make you think. We all do, but I also like games that are fun to play when you get into the nitty gritty of actually putting, it's worth setting up, it's worth taking down, it's worth organizing, and investing that time that I'll be able to go back to it. I like games that give you decisions that seem to be the kind of things that you would have to do in real life. It's never going to be totally realistic, but I think there are some games that do that better than others. At one point, like many of us, and many of you probably still are, but you're kind of a completist where you get a system and you feel like you need to get all the games in that system. And I'm not like that anymore. There are some systems where I will probably buy and try to get all the games for that particular system. BCS is one of them. Interestingly enough, for instance, the system for Rose to Gettysburg 2 is one where I've gone back and forth. I've had more games in this than just this one before, but we'll get to that in a second. So these are kind of representative of the ones that I've focused on the most. I've got other ones in my collection, but they're not necessarily systems that have a bunch of games in the system. They're kind of one-offs that I might or might not keep. But these are ones that I've kind of landed on through the last 10 years. The first of which is the BCS system, which I really, really like. I actually had 2 or 3 of these games right away, and I just had trouble grokking it at first. And I was looking to get some more money to get some other games, so I sold them, and then regretted it and got them back one at a time. And now I have all the ones, now that they have Araku out. I have not gotten to Panzer's Last Stand. I need to get to that. But the other 3 I've played and had a lot of fun with. And this first scenario that I tried on Araku was fun. Maybe a little too luck based, but it was fun. So I really like the BCS system. I'd highly recommend trying one of the smaller ones and see if you can get into the system, because it's worth just trying and figuring out, because I can't say enough good about this, even though MMP tends to be a little expensive. And then also with MMP, originally was Avalon Hill. This Great Campaigns of the Civil War system is one. I had one of the original, I think the very first original Avalon Hill. That was Stonewall Jackson's Way, I think. And I sold that off with the other Avalon Hill ones. I didn't, by that point, I wasn't playing a lot, and I didn't really get into that game very much. And this is another one where I started to get more and more of these individual games in the Great Campaigns system. But I just decided that with all the other things I have, that it's a great system, but there's so much in this particular box that I don't really feel the need to have the other ones. That may sound like heresy, but that's how I feel. I'm tempted to look for the new Grant Takes Command that's going to be out eventually with MMP, but I like all the things that are in this box already. So this is like several games in one, so there's plenty to last you with just this. But this is another one that I think is, in operational level, really does what it sets out to do. It's very good. Another one of my favorites, and this one I have all of the games in the system, including look back, Fearful Slaughter, South Mountain. I should say all of them, but I don't have the other RSS. You can adapt Fearful Slaughter to the line of battle system, and it works fine. There's a little tinkering you have to do, but I really like this, and really like what am I trying to say here? None But Heroes is a really great game. I was able to finally see that battlefield this past fall. That's an amazing sight if you haven't been there. This is another one that really plays well once you understand what's going on. This plays pretty quickly. And there are plenty of scenarios in this, and None But Heroes, that you can play solitaire. The order system is not as ponderous as you might think when you first glance at it. So, highly recommended line of battle. To take Washington is probably the weakest. I think it's more. I think that's more if you haven't done the system before and you want to try it out, because it has limited replay value in my mind. This is another system I've gone back and forth on with this Great Battles of Alexander, and I've had other ones. But again, this is the GBOH series. There's tons of games involved in that, but I don't feel the need to. I've got SPQR and this, and that's it. And I will never run out of things to play in this. So again, it's a little bit more difficult to get into at first, but once you've played a couple times, it flows really easily, very well. This is a monster in a couple of ways. Again, it's a little bit different kind of system to Grok. I will actually have to say that I enjoyed playing this, and I'm looking forward to the new Bulge one that's coming out, the Bastogne, Race for Bastogne, that should be shipping this week, they said. But I think if I had to compare, again, there's more like company level almost in this company and Battalion. I think this is a much easier system to get going onto the table than the Grand Tactical system. And again, this is very pricey, although you could have gotten, I was kind of ticked because I got the Greatest Day, the British Juno sword. I got that. It wasn't full price, but it was closer to it. Back when it first came out, I got a little bit of a deal, but then you could have gotten it for, I don't know, I think like $90 in one of the sales. But there's a lot of play in here. I have a harder time getting back into this than I do BCS. That's just my personal opinion. That's how my take on it. But I am keeping this and looking forward to Race for Bastogne. So that's another big system. Battle for Normandy is a monster game. I really like it for kind of it's I'm not going to say old-fashioned, but it's a little bit more in that hex encounter kind of system that you're used to. The rules are not a big deal. It's just the scope of the game. There are some things you have to read a few times to get stuck in your head, but this is just a monster game for having a monster game, and I will keep it because it's probably the definitive game for setting up the entire Normandy campaign. If I ever had a chance to do that, that would be fun. I have not gotten into the Dark series as much as I thought I would. I'm probably going to keep Dark Summer. I only played it once. I've played around with the other ones. I sold them off, and it's probably going to be for an operational game. I'll probably keep this for the Normandy battle. It's a little simpler and easy to set up and get into right away. It's an interesting system, the Ted Racer. I don't know if this is not controversial, but for me, ASL is, and for a lot of people, it's a whole other world. But I originally got started with the Avalon Hill version with Squad Leader, as many people did, and just kept buying as a new game came out. I kept buying those, got into GI Anvil of Victory, and then eventually ASL came out, and it was just an evolution that you got sucked into, and it felt like you had to get. I don't think I ever had the Japanese modules. I think I only got. I mean, I had the French, Partisans, Italians, all those, and those are all sold off in my fire sale back in the late 90s. And then in the last 10 years, I saw that ASL was still going strong, and I bought Beyond Valor, the new version, and the rules, and had it, tried it out. I just decided I didn't want to get sucked in again because there were so many other systems I wanted to try. But then discovered the starter kit versions, and when I tried this version of ASL, I thought this is about what I wanted to have for a tactical game, and to me this hits the spot, and I don't need to go any farther than this. I've got all the starter kits, so it has the armor and the Japanese, etc. And I think this works great because you can set up a scenario very quickly, and I already have, the good thing is I already have the chops, the old chops for doing ASL. So I understand the basic concepts, and then I only have to really look at some of the fine details that come up with some of the rules. And yet I don't have to go off the deep end and do the full ASL rule set and etc. So I think this is a good thing to have for those tactical battles and still have some detail. So this is recommended if you don't want to get into the ASL stuff full bore. And then get this one I was really interested in because I had the original War and Peace. Of course, I sold it off. And this is just a great package for the War and Peace when they came back with this beautiful. If you had the old one, it was like black and white. Let me pull this out. I mean, to me, this is a gorgeous map. And maybe it, in today's standards, it's not that fantastic, but I'm comparing it to the original, and this is light years above that. It's still easy to read. There's not tons of different terrain, but it's nice to look at, and it's very well thought out. And the campaign, I haven't tried it. The campaign scenario has been improved upon with this version, and there's lots of, this is, if you have just this one game, you've got lots of scenarios you can do and never do the campaign. So that's one I'll definitely keep. And then lastly is just one most recent additions. This thing is I don't know, I've already done a review on it, so I'm not going to say tons more, but I know there's a few things with errata and counters that people have been talking about, but I just, this is an incredible package. It's, if you can get it for $85 somewhere, that's a steal. I know it's listed for over 100 now with full price retail, but it's still worth it. I mean, you can't possibly play all the scenarios in this game unless you spend just the next few years of your life just doing this. But it's just, there's so many cool things you get to do in here. There's so many decisions you have to make. This, to me, this is definitive. I'm just going to say it's the definitive Pacific War operational game. Not tactical, not necessarily strategic. Although if you've got the time, some people are digging into the strategic scenarios now, but it's just, if you're interested in the Pacific War at all, an operational level, you have to get this. That's all there is to it. And one last word about that, with Pacific Theater, just my opinion, but if you're looking at a tactical air naval game in the Pacific, one of the best things you could do, if you could find the people for it, is play Flat Top, the old Avalon Hill or Flat Battalion. No, anyway, the Flat Top from that era, but using a double blind with an umpire. That I've only done that once, and that was incredible. That's a great game, but that's hard to do. If you can only play solitaire, it's Pacific or Flat Top really isn't the one for you. But that's a great tactical naval individual battle kind of game. You could put on your radar if it's not already. I've got Carrier. I didn't pull that out. I've got the revamped maps and counters. That's an incredible solitaire game. If you want to really get into the nitty gritty of carrier battles and actually running a carrier and prepping planes, landing planes, having that feeling of searching and not being sure what's coming at you, that's a great game to get into. That takes a little bit of effort. And then the last thing I would say about the Pacific is to take a look at Empire of the Sun, because that's probably the definitive strategic level game you're going to find in the Pacific Theater. And again, it's a different kind of system, card driven, but it's maybe difficult to grok. Again, the second time you go over, the third time you go over, and you just got to sit down and try an initial scenario out, and see what happens. But again, that's one works really well face to face. So that's where I'm sitting for most of my gaming and what I'm focusing on. There are some other games in that I've got on my shelf that I'll get to less often. But oh, I thought I had one other I was going to mention. That is the Men of Iron, Infidel, Blood of Roses. That whole GMT Men of Iron series. That, I'll grab it. This has a lot of play value in it, and I don't think this is very hard to get into. And again, you tons of scenarios, but I'd mention that as well. So if you only had all of these, you'd probably be at least from my perspective. If I only had these, I would be happy. I could get rid of most everything else I have. I've just decided I'm not going to be a collector. It's a good thing because I've sold off a lot of things. So I do some sci-fi and fantasy stuff too, but not nearly as much as all these. So that's my 2 cents, and that's where I'm at. It'd be great to hear what other people think, and what you're into and what you think some of the best systems are. I'd love to hear about it. So you can comment below. We'll see you next time. Thanks.